The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the sponsors, advertisers, or presenters. Advertising does not imply endorsement by the sponsors and presenters.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Lighting Controls Podcast. We have another fantastic guest in store for you today, but before we jump into the conversation, let me just take a minute to remind everyone that today's episode is presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and it's also financially supported by NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And if you haven't been over to the lightingcontrolspodcast.com yet, what are you guys waiting for? You can get all your sweet merch, like the shirt that I'm wearing, or your coffee mug, or a hat. You can also get all your industry news from there. We have all the social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can get all sorts of stories, not only about the show, but other industry news from that location as well. So be sure to check us out there and follow us on all the social media pages. Now, as we jump into today's conversation, we have a fantastic guest, Daniel Salinas, with us today. So, Daniel, would you mind just giving us a quick introduction on who you are and what you do?
Oh, goodness. There's a lot of different things. I've been in the industry now. This will be actually, as of Halloween, it will be 45 years that I've been in the industry.
Wow.
I started out with a small distributorship, and after about, and then worked there as everything from showroom manager to design, and became a commercial lighting designer there. Had a lot of projects with design build contractors over the years there. And after about 9 years, I left there to go to work for one of those contractors, which is a design build firm in Seattle that I was with for 28 years. We went from doing small projects to high rises and specialty projects of all different sorts. So in the meantime, I was getting involved in a lot of stuff, IES being one of those. We got on the board of the IES, not only locally, but also nationally, and was president from 2013 and 14. Then have been involved since then, after leaving those positions, been involved in not only IES committees, such as the LPA committee that Webb and I are on, but also various other committees with the IES, with ASHRAE, the Standards 100 Existing Building Energy Commission, the committee, and the California Energy Alliance as well. So they keep me busy, all of these different things, as well as my practice. Since 1985, I've been a solo designer working for myself, and on projects with people that have been clients of mine for many, many years in some cases, or ones that have heard about me and wanted me to work with them on some special projects. So that's my semi-retirement, which I hope will be this way till the very end, where I can work half of my time on committees and the other half on projects. They keep me very busy.
Wow. So you've been a very, very busy individual.
Yeah, it's a busy time.
So is your main focus now with what you do, is it mostly design from a lighting perspective? Is it lighting design? Is it controls design? Is it everything?
Yeah, it's both. I do, lighting systems designer is what I've been titled since way back in the, I guess the 80s, because I do work on all systems and all the lighting control systems, and then integration with other trades and other disciplines. But lighting design and lighting controls design are both together. Now, what I'm working on primarily now, I've got some new projects that have come along, but a majority of the work that I'm finding right now that people are bringing to me, existing projects, especially existing controls projects, where I've got at least 3 hotels that I'm working with that are renovating their control systems or that need to renovate their control systems, and 2 other facilities, some churches and other things where the systems are getting old and they don't, there's nobody around anymore to handle them. So it's that type of work, especially right now. Renovation is a big deal right now. And if anybody's looking that has been in the new construction industry for a long time, if you want to test your metal and you've never done renovation work, that's a place to test it. Just be careful. The pricing is completely different. and you'll spend more time on renovation than you will on a new construction project. So
I don't disagree with that personally, but why do you think that is? For some of our
well,
listeners who maybe don't do renovation.
yeah. Well, number one, it's how you do the project on a new construction project. You've got a clean slate. You can put in the backbone systems. You can put in all the infrastructure yourself. You're the one that's responsible for getting all that in. On an existing building, you have existing infrastructure. You can't necessarily tear out walls and pull in new stuff. And in a lot of cases, it may be buildings that they're still occupied. They've got tenants. They want to make sure they can work around that. So in the case of a hotel, how do you do that in such a way that you're not doing total disruption? They're doing in fact, one I'm working on today is getting all the ballrooms and big meeting rooms, the existing ones, onto how they would look under a new system. And how do I do that without serious interruption? Because that's their money makers. And
Yeah.
so they have to make sure that those are available. So your time that you're going to be in there is critical. You're going to do a lot of your backbone work during time when they're not occupied, and then come in. But that means you have to go in and audit what the existing is. So what I've learned over the years is, especially in control systems, is there's a lot of systems out there that you can really test who's good and who's not by those systems. For example, manufacturer one that I'm working on right now, the reason why it's critical now is because it's 15 years old, or actually, yeah, it's almost 15 years old. And the manufacturer was sold a couple of times. That control system manufacturer was sold a couple of times. The only place they can get parts is on eBay if they can find them. And and there's issues going on with it. And so they've come to the realization that now they have to do something about it. And how they're going to take care of it. So that means that we have to come in, and the first thing I do is see what they have. Is there anything that can be maintained? Maybe just needs updates. And in this case, unfortunately not, because there's no parts for it. So we have to replace all that. Now, how do I replace it in such a way that I'm not doing a major overhaul, but can do something that can be put in while this existing system is still running, and then do a transition over? And that's the difficult part. And so that's where I say it takes time, because you have to audit the existing. You have to see the needs of the user. You also have to understand a bit about who's taking care of that existing system, whether or not they have the ability to do it. And then you give them things that are going to bring them up to current code, sensor technology, and interface with other systems. Most of the projects that I do, I'm integrating with HVAC. I'm integrating with fire smoke alarm systems, all of these systems. So I have to make sure that I can do that. And if they don't currently have it, give them that option so that they can use those to their benefit. So but it means that you have to spend a lot more time in the initial getting to know the project, getting to know the people that are running that project, looking at the existing systems. Can you reuse those pathways they have, or not? I mean, there's a variety of different things, but if it's a good system, I've got another couple of projects that have a good system in place, but it's getting pretty old. The front end on it needs some help. But the backbones are great. They just mean now with new technology, with LED technology coming in and stuff, now I have to just reuse that system that's there, but put in adapters in line that can adapt to the new technology. So that way I'm not tearing out big cabinets, but instead just using them as an interface, and then bringing in a new front line to control them. So it depends on what is available there. Sometimes it's DMX. Sometimes it's a front end system that can communicate in a different way. But you have to examine all those and see how you can make good impact without tearing apart everything and having it throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because what I have found is on lighting control systems, we actually do a really good most of the good manufacturers out there, they do a great job of it, and you don't have to babysit it like you do HVAC.
Right. Yep.
HVAC is a lot of monitoring, a lot of babysitting. We don't have that problem with lighting controls. For the most part, we got control systems that I've got control systems out there that I've interfaced with that were over 20 years old. And it didn't take much to be in there because they're still working top. And if I could get a manufacturer that originally built that to come in and do a functional testing on it to make sure that it's still in good shape, then we can go from there to see how we can update some of the front end stuff on it, or add in interfaces that we can talk to existing or new technology lighting equipment. That's what we're doing. So a lot of ways to do it, but it depends on the manufacturer. And
yeah, it very much,
you know,
very much.
a lot of that changes. So yeah. But overall, lighting controls has done a great job. The lighting controls portion has done a great job of having dependable product, for the most part. Those that came in and they were electronics people before, and now they want to change everything over and become lighting. There's a lot of eye-opening experiences they were running into, and bless their hearts for those that have stuck with it and overcome some of that. But I thought they thought it was going to be easier than it was when they first came in.
Yep, that's for sure. There definitely are challenges, and you're right. Building retrofits can be a challenge, especially anything that was done in phases, right? Because now you're spending even more time on the front end, because building A may have been wired by one electrician and building B by another, and they may or may not have used the same wire, and pathways that you believe exist may not. So it can be a challenge.
Yeah, it can. I know that I've had somewhere, I had a church that it did sometime back, where they had used a really good the system they had used for their back end. Their dimming panels were all theatrical grade ones, because they had theater lighting as well as the architectural lighting that they were controlling. But their problem was that those back panels, that division had been bought by somebody who thought they were now going to go into the architectural arena, and so they stuck this architectural front end on it that was not very good. And they were using the low voltage network to talk to the systems, and the panels were doing what they were supposed to do. It was just the front end wasn't. So when I came in and took a look at what was going on, I looked at the panels and realized what they were, and that they had the ability to do DMX. And so I was able to bring in a manufacturer that was DMX based for the front end that had been around for a long time. And we tapped into those panels. Then they had them come in and do testing on both to make sure everything was working great. And now we replaced that front end, which was a problem and causing them problems all the time, to something that was very simple and easy for them to manage. And in fact, we gave them the ability to be able to preset settings, push a button on the wall, and that for temporary use, and maintain it. So if they had a wedding on a Saturday and the tech wasn't able to be there, the tech could preset things during the week, and then usher can come and push the buttons whenever they needed them pushed, and things would set to preset to where they needed to be. So those type of system things are out there. But it was one where we had great panels in there built by a very good company that just happened to be bought out by this other one. But because it had the ability to do more than just one method of control, it was able to do DMX as well as low voltage interface. Because it was able to do that, we were able to find somebody else that could work a better front end on it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
Now, do you find it difficult at all especially with retrofits, having conversations with owners when you get into not only replacing the control system, but now all the additions that you need to make, adding sensors, tying into fire alarm, and the added cost that goes along with all of those, new devices that they didn't have previously?
Well, having spent 28 years for a design build electrical contracting firm, I was interfacing with those owners all the time anyway. And there were a lot of times we were doing projects that were not on the street. They were not street projects. We were contracted directly by people. And so we would come in, I'd be working directly for owners. And even now in my position, I work so many times I'm working directly with an owner. And so I'll go in and just explain to them what current code is, why it's going to benefit them, and what we'd have to do. There's benefits to some of the changes in technology that help to reduce those costs. Before we had the ability to do wireless on our sensors, on sensors, it was more work and labor involved to get the wiring in place where we had to have the sensors. And so now with the ability to do those wirelessly, that has helped a lot and helped to reduce the cost in labor. Labor is what costs you the most on a project. So and that means a lot more time also for the front end, for the designer, who has to make sure that there's enough information is clear enough on there so that that electrician can get that handled and do it correctly. So as much information as you can give an electrician, the better. And having spent so many times working with those electricians because of for a contractor, I depended on the electricians to bring me back reports of what they found. So if somebody said this is the easiest thing and the best thing since sliced bread, I would bring the electrician in and say, okay, let's test it. And then if we used something on a project that was new or we hadn't, the first thing I would do is have the electrician come in. The two of us would walk the site. We'd talk about it. Was it as great as they said it was? Where were the issues we ran into? And that helped to form whether or not I use it the next time. It's just, it's beyond the sales data. It's getting into the fact that somebody that not only has to use it, but is probably going to have to service it or maintain it if it's for so many times on contractors having to do that, come in and do that for the owner.
Yeah. And so it's funny you mentioned that, because we had a great conversation with Lynn Gomes last week where we talked about exactly this, about the need for designers and specifiers to go out to the field after a project is completed, or even during the project, and walk through and get an understanding for how is it going? How does this actually all go together? Does it do everything you wanted it to do? And how is the system going to be long-term for the owner, for service and everything else? And that we find that it does seem like there are a lot of, maybe not a lot, that might not be the right word, but there are some lighting designers who maybe don't necessarily take that extra time and that extra step to go out to the site afterwards and really evaluate how a project went. And it seems that really helps people to grow, and understand where there may have been flaws, not only in equipment but also potentially their design, just because they could have made a slight tweak to something.
Well, and Lynn is chair of the LP8 IES LP8 committee, the Lighting Commissioning Committee that I'm on, and so I just saw her a couple of hours ago. But she and I have had those discussions, and we've had those discussions in the creation of that LP8, that lighting commissioning document, on talking about things such as training for the individuals and how often you do it. What I normally will do is when we do the testing at startup and training, we'll do the training, we'll walk through with them, and whether it's a factory doing the training or whether I'm doing the training on the system, is we do that initial just to get them used to using the bare bones basics that they need for day to day right then, because they've got 30 other systems that they have to learn at that same week. So they've got all this stuff crashing on them. They're not going to remember it.
Yes.
So give them the basic training to how to get in and how to get out. And then I always tell them before I leave, I want you to take a pen and paper and set it by your computer. And I want you to try to break my system. And then if you run into issues, try things. And if you run into issues and you can't get back out of it, call me. I'll walk you through it. We'll get back out of it. But I said, just try it. And then I'll see you in 3 months. And in 3 months, I'll come back in. I'll sit down with them and say, okay, what did you find? I didn't get any calls from you, so I'm assuming everything went well. What did you find? And we'll start talking. We'll go through their list, or we'll just start doing it. At that point, I can then introduce to them, oh, by the way, did you know your system also does this? And we train a little bit more. With facilities people, and I teach. I've taught on a class in association with a group that does training for facilities managers and asset managers. And some of the things that talking to them and learning what it's all about, they've got a lot on their plate. And sometimes there are those that are savvy about technology and savvy about lighting controls, and others say, look, it's working. I'm not going to touch it. I'll just
Yep.
call you if there's any issues. And I always tell them, it's your system. You need to know how it works, because if you're waiting for a factory person or you're waiting for an electrician to come on a Saturday when things are screwing up and you're trying to get a hold of somebody, it might be best if you know enough about your system that you can get yourself out of the troubles and then start figuring out what it is once you get back in the normal week. So having that training is critical for these people. And there's when I'm training and teaching these people in these classes and stuff, there's so many of them just going, yeah, I had no idea, because we do have, most of the time we're chasing down why that magnetic door lock is still alarm going off on us when it's not supposed to be, or why the smoke alarm system keeps going up, or I've got HVAC that's reading different reports in different parts of the building. They've got all that. They don't have time to chase down lighting. And if it comes on and if it goes off, that's all they care about.
Yep. It's very true, though. Far too often, that's exactly it. It turned on, lights are on. Great. Awesome.
Yeah. I've gone back to buildings where I was called back in to do some renovation work after 4 years. They wanted to do some expansion work. So we come in and I go into the lighting control system and sit down at the computer to see how things have been going on. And I realized that the last time any changes were made was 4 years before when I did the last changes. And I asked them why, there's no updates. Why haven't you done anything to it? I said, well, it's been working fine. Everything, we have no problems with it. The system's working fine. Yeah, but you need to reload the show about every 3 months, 3 months or so. Reload everything. Make sure that everything is current. You need to make sure that you have the current version of the software, because there could have been bugs in the other system. And I'll walk them through all this stuff, and we'll do it right then. And okay. I'll come back to them a few months later. So did you run any of it? We just haven't had a chance to get around to it. We were just waiting for you to come back. We were going to do it again. So that's what happens.
It's a very common story, though. I mean, right? We run into that ourselves all the time, where it's exactly that. People just wait till you get back. And I do agree. That first training day, especially on a new building, those guys are being pulled in so many directions. It's very much, we're going to give you the basics, and I'll see you in a month. I'll see you in 2 months.
Yeah.
And I want you, it's exactly that. I want you to write down all of your questions, anything major, call me, but otherwise, write everything down and we'll address it when we come back.
Yeah, I've even brought them donuts. I've even brought them donuts, and they still didn't remember.
Or you went all that way to bring them donuts, and they still didn't remember. That's terrible.
Still didn't remember. So yeah. But the thing is that there's another aspect to that, and this comes to something else that I think it might have been Webb or Lynn, we were talking about it, but it's that customer service aspect of something. The reason why you have contractors like the firm that I worked for, why they were on so many projects that were not on the street, or they were on a project that was a select bid list of maybe 2 or 3 people, was because of their reputation for doing good work, and plus on the fact that they created those relationships with those clients, with that owner, with that general contractor, with that developer. So they created relationships and that sense of trust that if there was a problem, they took care of it. And it was taken care of quite rapidly, so that you didn't have an issue. But we were talking about, and the question came up was that I think somebody had asked one time is, what was the one thing that you felt made the biggest change in you in your career going forward, the job you did or whatever that was the biggest influencer for you going forward? And I said, well, when I was in college, after getting out of high school and went to college, and during college, I worked for 2 different people at different times. One was Montgomery Ward, and the other was JCPenney. Both those companies were very strong on teaching customer service. And I said, if anything that's helped me out the most, it was the learning I got from being taught customer service. by people who they lived off of customer service. So
Hmm.
that's, I think, is the biggest thing. It taught you sales, taught ability sales, but also taught customer service, how to take care of your people and have them come back. So that's the biggest one there, especially if you're doing renovation work. You want to make sure that you've gone that extra mile to make sure that the project is done well and that you've taken care of the issues. You've sat down with them and said, what are the issues that you have going on? What do we need to talk about here? What do you need the system to do? What are the concerns? And so from that, we build the owner's project requirements, then goes into that basis of design. Even on a renovation project, you have a basis of design. How am I meeting the needs of this owner? And you guys,
Hmm.
Lynn may have talked about that as well, because we had long discussions
Yep.
on it. But it is getting to that point, even on a renovation project, is I want to make sure that I am meeting your needs and say, what is the biggest issue you've had with the lighting? Well, biggest issue is blah, and they'll go into it and say, okay, we need to make sure that the next system doesn't have that kind of issues, but gives you abilities to move forward and not backward. And if I don't get any calls from them, then that means that it's going well. But I'd like to hear from them, even if it is going well, just to say, well, everything's going great, but we just want to make sure that there's nothing you wanted us else to take a look at. And usually there is.
Hmm.
But just that you want to make sure that everything is well. But it's just taking care of that client, that customer, that way.
Yeah. Customer service, I think, in any industry is important,
Yeah.
right? But I think especially with not just lighting, it could be anything mechanical, any of the trades, right?
Mhm.
Building
Yeah.
that relationship, especially when you're doing renovations, building that
Mhm.
relationship with an owner is key, because you don't need the best salesman. You don't need the guy who's going to sell them the used car, who's going to talk
Yeah.
them, right? You want the guy They want the guy that they can trust, that they know is going to give them what's right for them and for their project, and who's going to
Right.
be there to take care of them for the long run. And that's what most owners really want. They want that sense of comfort. They want to know that that
Right.
person's there for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Mhm.
when you do your systems, do you on a lot of them, are you just doing the design on the front end, or are you doing all the startup and integrations as well?
It depends on the project. For my position now as an outside consultant for these, I'll work with the electrical contractors on them as and maybe if, for example, we got one now where I'm working directly for the owner,
Hmm.
but my job is to design the system, and then essentially project manage that aspect of the work. So
Okay.
I'm the owner's representative on the project for that work and managing that end of it. So any of the lighting controls, or the lighting and the lighting controls, depends on how depth of it is. My
Hmm.
job will be, part of my fee is to do that contract administration on that lighting part. So I'm out at the job site answering
Yep.
questions, making sure it's done right, then building the test reports that they're going to have to use at the end to make sure that they fit the criteria of the design, and also building up the basis of what the operations and maintenance manuals, materials that we need in there, that specification, how they're supposed to maintain it over time,
Hmm.
and all these things. Those are part of the requirements that I put in, and that goes into my fee, and it goes into my narrative and description of what I do for them on that project, so they understand that it's more than that. But all that, I've had ones where it was just a lighting controls renovation project, or another one that
Hmm.
was both lighting and lighting controls. There was no other trades involved except for a few patches here and there. And so that's ones where either the contractor would come back to me and say, when you put your proposal together, we need you to put in hours to do the project management work, because this is beyond us. And we would like you to
Yep.
handle that end of it and work with us on that. So I'll project manage the work on that. That's what I did when I worked for Nelson, the contracting firm in Seattle. I
Nice.
was project managing the lighting portions of all those work.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet that you've been writing control intent narratives long before it was the cool thing to do.
Yeah, I think the first sequence of operation I did was probably I don't know, late 80s,
Yeah.
early 90s, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been it's been a long time. I started, and that was mainly because I needed to give instruction to the people out in the field on what this system was going to
Yep.
be doing. So they needed to know what it was. And when we started using it, the first sensors I used had to be back around, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s as well, back when they were a
Yep.
pain in the butt. Um, but especially if you had an office where somebody had the old Bell style hearing aid, and they'd be
Yep.
complaining of that, the sensor bothering them every time they walked by it. But yeah, we would have to do it. So it was important to have that for the electricians. And then when I worked for an electrician, I was even more important there that they had all the full instructions of what was going on. So that meant I was writing sequence of operations back in the late 80s, early 90s. So, and the narratives as well.
So when you write a sequence of operations, I'm just curious. We're trying to poll people on certain things from time to time. Do you
Yeah.
prefer a narrative or like a matrix or a combination of both?
The personally, I like the narrative style of it, but usability in the field matrix. The guys want something they can look at, glance over, grab it, and do it. So I do it as a matrix for them. But I do write a narrative. The narratives I write are on the system design, the design intent, what it was
Hmm.
designed for, so that they understand that the reason why I'm doing this is because of this. X plus Y equals Z. This is why we're doing it. So I do that for them. I also, if there's any special areas or that we want a certain look or a certain concept to be, if I've done sketches up with it, whether they're CAD sketches or Revit, or whether they're just hand sketches that I've done working with an architect or an owner, and we said, let's do this, this, and this. If I've got some of those where we've defined how we want it to look, um, I will even give copies of those to the electrician. Say, here's what I have. Here's some renderings we did, or here's just some sketches. Take a look at it so you understand how I want that to look, or how I want that to operate. And that is real beneficial, because then they'll say, now it makes sense to me. It didn't make sense to me why you had this here, and now I understand it. So give them, if you got a piece of paper, and got a little piece of paper or something, give it to them. I mean, it goes back to sales, that sales thing again. Give them enough information that they can say, okay, now I fully understand it. It's kind of one of those things where I used to have a couple of electricians that were like this, that they were great guys, did awesome work, they've been around for a long time. But this one guy in particular that of the two that was really fun to work with was, he would say, you talk to him, okay, this is what I want it to be done. Oh, okay. And my first thought was, he didn't get it. Now, and I would go, and I want to make sure that you understand this is this, and we're going to go to this and this. And you go, oh, okay. You have a little, but oh, okay. I go, he's still not getting it. And I do it the third time and go, and I'll expand on it even deeper, just make sure it was fully there. And he go, oh, okay. Then he got it. 3 times, then he got it. But it's that way with having information, because they get a lot of stuff tossed at them. And,
Yeah.
if the electrician doesn't fully understand it, I've seen that happen with other trades. I was on a project walkthrough with an architect one day, and we're up about the 15th floor of a building and going through, and they had it was an office space, but they had on that floor, they had amenities, and one was this little station, was a little coffee booth they were building in. And we had a certain way we wanted the lighting to look and how it was going to set over this and everything else. And so we're walking through as the layouts are done, and I said, well, that looks great, but what are you going to do about that? We look up, and plumbing had taken this pipe straight over and straight through. So it went straight over at about 8 foot off the ground, right through where this coffee bar was, and straight back into the wall. And so he goes, what? What's that doing there? I said, well, let's ask this guy. I pulled the plumber over and said, so we have a question why that's there. Well, we needed to get it out of this area. Why didn't you go through that area there, which was a room that you could have? Well, I guess we could have done that. Architect he was upset. It was just, well, do it. It was just like, what do you? So you have, if you, and that was because in plumbing, they didn't give enough information to let him know
Yeah.
that shouldn't be there. On the same project, we walk around, there's the layout of where the floors are going to go. And we're talking about how the lighting is going to situate in this, because it was open ceiling structure. And here we stopped at this one location where the corner wall. I said, so do you see any problems with where they marked out this? He goes, no. I said, well, here's the one. Look up. There's an air handler right there on the corner where a wall is supposed to be that goes full to structure. And you go, no. So once again, it was that the communication wasn't done right, and there wasn't enough information on that. So it's just, yeah, you have to know a lot in those, especially coming from design build. We had to know a lot of stuff. So my people that work for me, I train them to know how to understand everything from structural, civil drawings, plumbing, HVAC, fire smoke systems, so that they understood enough about when they looked at it on a set of drawings. I required them to go through the drawings, even before Revit came out. I had them go through the drawings, see where they saw impacts to where we were going to lighting, so we could try to nip it in the bud as much as possible ahead of time. So there's all kinds of stuff like that that's out there. So it's just giving a lot of notes, a lot of things to look at.
Yep, and it does seem like people who come from the design build side in general look at things slightly differently, especially even with new construction. You kind of tend to still have that nuance of design build even with new construction, and you tend to look at things a little differently and maybe pay a little bit more attention to certain, to all the other trades and everything else, like you said, prior to everyone using Revit and doing BIM modeling. So it makes a big difference.
It does, and even in the modeling of systems, you get out on a job site, and all of a sudden the ductwork is thicker than what it was on there. And they came back and said, "Well, we looked at there's a requirement and some changes that meant that we had to use insulated duct, and now this duct is like bigger, and it wasn't that small; it was big." One of those took up and it went straight down a hallway that was very narrow. We had no place we could put sconces or anything on that. The light and because of where the ductwork was at, it was difficult. So I went up to the electrical, the HVAC people. I said, so I have to have lighting in here, and we can't strap it down below that; it'll be too low. So I was joking, and I said, "You mind if I just cut a big donut in the middle of your ductwork?" And he looks at me and he goes, "Actually, we'll do that for you. Yeah, we could do that." And then made a big opening in the ductwork so that and so that we could go up and be able to get fixtures installed. And we brought them down to the bottom, so it looked like it was done purposely. But that was just that conversation. And all they can say is no, and then you have to go back to the team and say, "Okay, guys, we got a big problem." Well, in this case here, it was, we can fix that problem. We can make it look good too.
Wow.
So
that's crazy. Yeah. But you're right. People can only say no. If you don't ask, you'll never know, right? That people can only tell you no. So there's no reason not to at least start the conversation. So when you're on a job and you're not handling the startup yourself, and you've got multiple systems that need to be started up, do you let the electrician handle that, or do you prefer to have an integrator or a third party involved to handle system startups?
Yeah, it depends on the seriousness of it and how much experience they have with the system. So I've done ones where it was very complicated. The control network the controls were really complicated because of what it was doing. And there, definitely we had a third party wanting to make sure that everything was done right, because then that integrator was able to walk through the sequence and concentrate on it, and that's their background. And so having them there to make sure that every aspect of it was done well. If a manufacturer has a startup technician that I've worked with before that I really, really like, I am not afraid to tell that manufacturer, this is the person I want on my job. I'm giving you enough time ahead of time to plan for it. This is the person I want, because they understand this type of material. I've done that on projects where I've had systems that I was integrating into that were over 20 years old, and I knew the project was originally done, and knew that the integrator or the startup tech knew that did that original job was still working for that same organization, just still doing that work. And so I said, that's the person I need on this job because they understood the old technology and we're tying into that and just doing some upgrades to it and some front end to it. I want somebody that knows that system, because if I just have you grab somebody off the street, they may only be trained in the new technology and not in the old. And they'll spend all their time on the phone trying to find they're trying to get questions and answers back on this, where that guy has it in his head. He knows that system and he'll get out there and be able to sit down and walk through it and handle it quickly. And he did. But it's, having somebody that understands, especially in renovation jobs where you're trying to maintain the existing, or at least reuse it in some way. You want to have somebody that knows it. If I can find somebody that, factory that the factory come back in and do a functional test on something, and I've done that, or I've asked them, it's your material. We're going to add some new pieces to it, but I want to check and make sure the old system is still good. And can we replace parts that are looking like they're going to wear out? And they'll come in, they'll do it, they'll earn the money for it, they'll get the coin, and but in the meantime, we've saved that owner thousands of dollars by maintaining that system. Keeping that system.
Yeah.
It's not under warranty, but it is back. It's been tested back to say it's now working. It's still working to where it's functioning, and we replace these parts to make sure of that. And that kind of thing, to me, is good service on a manufacturer's part. And that means I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to those kind of manufacturers whenever the next project, whenever other projects come along, because I can trust they'll be there over the long term. So
that's awesome. Daniel, we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to try and wrap some of this up. But the big takeaway here, right, I think, is relationships. Whether you're talking about you're working with an owner, or you're working with another firm, or even like you just mentioned, working with a manufacturer. Relationships are so important and so key in what we do, and having the trust in those other people and those other trades. And then we spend a lot of time on the show talking about system integrations for new projects, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about renovation. So I think it was really great to spend a lot of time talking about renovation, and maybe let some of our listeners who don't do that work know and understand and see some of the nuances that go into renovations, and how much more time is really required, especially on that front end, to go through and test an existing system and verify components and verify wire. Because I'm sure you've run into it. You show up on a system and everything looks great in the racks, and then you get to the field devices and you've got three different types of wiring that aren't the same wiring that's in the rack. And you've got to try and figure all that out and diagnose it. And then just, there's so much to it. So spending time up front and making sure that you've got really good documentation, having a good sequence of operations, and whether that is a narrative or a matrix or a combination of both, whatever that is for you, but making sure that the team that's in the field has the information and that the designer is readily accessible. And that is, I think, something that is unique to you, or not exclusively to you, but to you versus a lot of other firms, is a lot of times when you're on new construction, you don't have that direct communication with the designer, right? If you're the electrician, you're working through the general contractor who's sending their question back to the architect who's sending it to the designer. So it's really nice when, again, working on a design build or working in a renovation, where you can have direct access to the designer and be able to talk through some of the problems or challenges or ideas about, hey, I know you wanted this, but what about this? Or I'm having a hard time with this. What was the intent? So having that direct dialogue really is extremely helpful for the people in the field, and then for the owner to make sure that they're getting exactly what they expect out of their project at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think it's important for that person who's doing that design work, if they're working for a firm, an engineering firm, or whether they're working for a contractor, however they're doing it, is that it's a plus for your company when they feel comfortable with the work you do and confident about that they come back to you. They're also bringing that work back to your company, and the more you can do projects that are off the street, because if a relationships are built, the better your company will be long term. If all you're doing all day long is bidding on jobs with 100 other people, that's a time waster. Best is if you can find that way to build those relationships to where you're in a small list, or you're direct working for them where they just bring the projects to you. It means a relationship is good, but you have to work hard to keep it strong. So
Yes. Yep.
yeah,
I completely agree. So thank you so much, Daniel, for taking the time
yeah,
to speak with us today. Really appreciate having you on. I just
yeah.
want to take a minute to remind everyone that today's episode was presented by the LCA, the Lighting Controls Association, and it's also financially supported by NAILD, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And just remember, if you haven't been over to the lightingcontrolspodcast.com yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We've been telling you about it for about a year at this point. Check it out, get your merch, join the news feed, get all your information there. And until next time, have a good one.